Hi, I'm Elle, I work for the Warren Youth Project, and welcome to our online talks, all things period, for our Know Your Flow campaign. This week is the first in our 5 talks, and we're talking to IRISE International. They're an amazing organisation that help people who menstruate nationally and internationally as well, and their goal is to end period poverty. I'll hand you over to Acushla.
Hello, and thank you so much for coming. I've met Leah before. I don't know if I've met the other two, but yeah, thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with me. What I'm going to do is just share my screen so I can show you a presentation. Can everyone see that? Yeah. Cool. Amazing. So hi everyone, my name's Acushla. I'm the advocacy coordinator at IRISE International, and I believe that this is the first Know Your Flow event. So yeah, we're going to talk about menstrual stigma and myth busting. So just to be clear, when we say menstrual stigma, we're talking about period stigma, so stigma related to periods and menstruation. Yeah, so let me just kind of go through who we are and who IRISE is. We're a non-profit organisation, an NGO, and we work across the UK and Uganda. We basically address the menstrual related barriers that hold girls and women back and people with periods from achieving their full potential. We believe in a world where anyone who has a period is able to fulfill their hopes and dreams, regardless of the fact that they menstruate or that they are female. So yeah, that's us and that's me. So we're going to talk a bit today about sort of the stigma that is surrounding periods and menstruation and what that means. So I think to start off, I'd really like to kind of explore what does stigma actually mean and what is stigma in itself. So I think stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance. The stigma associated with menstruation in particular causes those who have periods to be shamed by society, and this is often shaped by different cultural and religious beliefs around menstruation and what period blood means, and what being on your period means. And stigma itself singles people out based on something negative that they are or that they experience. I just wondered, sort of beyond period stigma, whether any of you guys have any other sort of examples of stigma that either you've experienced yourself or you're just aware of in society. Would anyone like to unmute themselves and give me an example of a different kind of stigma beyond periods? Oh yeah, is it Izzy or Lizzie?
Lizzie, preferably.
Lizzie, go ahead.
Would you like a list of stigmas?
Go
because there's quite a lot. Well, a lot of stigmas around the Warren, around what it is and what it does, even from people pretty close to home, including my parents, used to absolutely, word that I can't say on a recording about the Warren, and I spent the past 5.5 years proving them wrong, because, well, the Warren does a lot of really good stuff and doesn't get the recognition it deserves, because apparently it's just a place in the middle of town where druggies and people like that go, whereas it's not. Another stigma is that all women should be able to get pregnant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fudge that. Because, well, I know a lot of people who are born with a quote-unquote female setup, and even they can't get pregnant. And there's a group known as TERFs that think that trans women aren't women because we can't get pregnant. And I'm like, hang on, that's not a very feminist thing to say. If you're saying that only women who can get pregnant are women, that's majorly misogynistic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll lower my hand now.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really insightful, and also just thank you for feeling comfortable for saying that within this space. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think all of those kind of issues of stigma are often around being sort of divergent from what's normal. I mean, obviously, we all know that, you know, normal isn't really a thing. But I think a lot of the individuals who experience stigma often feel that they diverge from the traditional sort of heterosexual, cis, white male within society. And so those who have periods fall into that. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Would anyone else like to sort of mention any other stigmas that they've experienced or they know of in society?
Do you feel anything, Leah?
What did you say?
Is there anything that you think stigma-wise that you've experienced?
Go here, leave me. My brother's here. I don't actually know. I probably have, but you know what I'm like. I'm so chill. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Get over it. Because
Yeah.
like it don't. Things like nothing really bothers me much, apart from this barrel of lard. Sorry. No, nothing really bothers me because it is what it is. Tough shit, isn't it? Really, you can't really change people's mindset, can you? If they're narrow-minded, then they're narrow-minded.
We shouldn't have to deal with people's narrow-mindedness, though, especially if it stops us and sometimes literally kills us from doing what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I would like to see a world where more people kind of think like you, Leah, in terms of, you know, what does it matter?
Yeah,
what people
I think it's because I'm just like, I wouldn't say hard-faced or like hard-shouldered, but if someone said something to me like about any of my illnesses, disabilities, or whatever, it don't whatever. It can't like, I don't know. It's just so what like I'm hard-shouldered, so I'm not. I don't know because I don't want to say it without because I know people when someone says something to them, it really affects them, and I understand that. But yeah, I've grown up on an estate that people say stuff to you, and you've just got to not deal with it, but get over it and move on with your life because. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
absolutely. No, not at all. I think I understand completely what you're saying. I think it's brilliant when people who feel like they suffer from some particular stigma have the self-confidence and the self-worth not to listen to those comments and to believe in yourself. And I think that's incredibly brave. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Leah.
Yeah, because like I just let people. Yeah, because I just let people get on with it. It's not affecting me, so quite frankly, I'm not really bothered. Whatever they want to do, so what? Let them get on with it.
Yeah.
What I'm not okay with is people thinking that they've got an opinion on something that doesn't actually affect them. But again, you've just got to be like, yeah, whatever. Oh, you've got Uber Eats. So we're trying to get codes for Uber Eats.
No, that's great. You can go ahead and do that. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's some people in the world who, you know, can kind of deal with that criticism and sort of build their own self-confidence. But then also, as Lizzie was saying, there's some instances where it can be offensive and it can be upsetting to assume something about, you know, the way someone looks or the way someone identifies, which might not be true. And the stigma and isolation which comes with that can be really, really challenging. So if I move on to sort of why periods in particular are stigmatized in the first place, the reason for that is mainly because of the view of women throughout history and throughout time. I'm sure that a lot of you know sort of what we're talking about when we say, you know, that sexism and misogyny has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. In particular, if we think back to sort of BC, like thousands and thousands of years ago, there was a theorist called Aristotle, who's a very, very famous guy. Actually, I can show you a little, he's so old that there isn't even a photo of him, like he's just a statue. But he basically
Oh,
realised that
oh my head.
that women and girls basically sort of less than men. Women and girls in terms of their periods are sort of failed semen. This was actually something that he wrote sort of within his writings, that a woman is the other to a man, if anything, is an undeveloped man. So kind of the idea of this stigmatization of simply presenting as a female goes back thousands and thousands of years BC. And also this stigma is mobilized throughout society, shaming all menstruators. And menstruation becomes a taboo issue, and an issue that must be kept a secret because it's uncomfortable and embarrassing. I think if we look forward into society today, we can see how period stigma isn't just experienced with women and those who present as female, also transgender men as well, and the complexities that come with that are incredibly challenging. So yeah, period stigma is something which affects so many people, whether you would assume that they have a period or not. So if we look at menstrual stigma specifically in the UK, period shaming in the UK often takes place in the form of bullying and jokes. The period shaming and stigma leads to isolation and embarrassment, with 77% of women who have experienced menstrual stigma saying that this happened at school. And I got this picture off of Snapchat, which I don't know if anyone else has done this, but you know, you just kind of shove a pad up your sleeve, or you shove a tampon up your sleeve when you're going to the toilet because you don't want anyone to know that you're on your period. The reason that we do that is because of the stigma and the embarrassment and the silence around the fact that we menstruate. In the UK, 48% of girls say they were embarrassed by the fact they had a period in the first place. And the most common site of bullying and stigma and isolation happened at school. So if we want to do something about this, we really need to be intervening when kids are at school, when they're learning about their own bodies and each other's bodies, and seeing what can we do as sort of advocates to make people realise that periods are completely normal, and a healthy thing to have if you have a uterus. So if we move on to menstrual stigma in everyday life, I wondered whether anyone could think of any sort of examples that they've been through personally or they know of where they see menstrual stigma happening in real life. So where you might have been shamed for having your period, or for being someone who looks like they might have a period. Would anyone like to share any examples of that? Yeah, Lizzie, go ahead.
Well, again, there's quite a lot of examples. Let's say, for example, I'm going to the shop to buy a sanitary product for someone who has a menstrual cycle. And it sort of links into the whole past culture when it comes to being trans, which really annoys me. Because if I don't pass and I pick up a pack of sanitary pads or a pack of tampons or whatever, I'm gonna get the whole, oh well, you shouldn't be picking that up. You don't go through it. Like I'm not here for me. I'm here for someone who literally can't walk because of it. And then when I do pass, they're all like, oh, that's a bit too open for me. I'm like, bugger off, Karen. But that's a whole different thing. And so I've never understood why people feel the need to comment on something that either they're not going through or will never go through. Like, because I know that no matter how many hormones, and how many surgeries I go through, medical science has not evolved to the point where we can give a trans woman a quote unquote actual period, which is both a blessing and a curse bloody hell. It's both a blessing and a curse in the same book, because well, yeah, I won't get an actual menstrual cycle, but I will get the cramps. And which is obviously nowhere near that of someone who is born with a quote female setup. So I don't think I'll ever be able to experience a proper period in little marks. But then again, I still feel as though my opinion is as valid as a cis woman.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think that with stigma, there comes this expectation that people know exactly what the menstrual experience is. And there's not just one menstrual experience, there's so many different intersections within that, which obviously you experience and you know very well. And I think that is a huge part of stigma, is if there's silence and everyone just assumes that everyone who has a period, I mean, everyone who has a uterus has a period, and everyone who has a period has cramps, and everyone who has cramps has, I don't know, headaches or is moody. You know, all of these kind of misconceptions that exist in society are all there because we don't talk openly about these things. And so to be able to hear like your experience and your story of how menstruation affects you, and how sort of being transgender affects you within this space is incredibly powerful for a lot of people to hear. So thank you so much for sharing that. Would anyone else like to chip in as to how they've ever experienced period stigma in their lives before?
I mean, I suppose I think what really drives me mad is when you might show some sort of emotion or whatever, and then somebody will be like, oh, it's the time of the month. Oh, she'll be on her period. Like, that really drives me mad. And it must drive everybody else mad as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can say that we've experienced that sort of attachment to having a period and being not able to function in the correct way, which is a huge part of stigma. One of the stigmas that I kind of wanted to show you all is around blood itself. And so if we kind of take a look at this first image here, this is, you know, a really common image which happens on toothpaste and mouthwash adverts, where you see, you know, usually a woman brushing her teeth, her gums start to bleed, and they talk about, you know, the dangers of gum disease, and no one flinches at that. No one has any comments. No one has any issues with that at all. And some of these adverts around mouthwash and toothpaste have gone to the extent of exploring this kind of shock factor, where the caption for this image was, "You wouldn't ignore blood from coming from any other part of your body, so why would you ignore it from your gums?" And again, this was not met with any backlash. This was not met with any sort of confusion. But however, if we look at period blood, it's always shown to be blue. It's always shown as this blue liquid, which to anyone who's, you know, seen or experienced a period is not accurate at all. Obviously, they're usually like a red-brown colour, and the consistency and texture is completely different to that of this blue liquid as well. Luckily, we're starting to move forward, and Body Form have basically shown blood as it is, as the correct sort of colour, within the first couple of days of the cycle, which is fantastic. But it's just something to reflect on, I think, in the fact that there's blood in certain situations which we all deem as natural. But if we're watching a really violent, gory film, there's no issue with that, even though violence itself is very disturbing. But when we talk about periods, which so many in the population have, and it's completely natural, and it happens to us multiple times every single year, suddenly there's I'm not sure about that, because it's relating to people who have uteruses, people who have periods, and to those who identify as female, and that's where the stigma comes from. I think, Lizzie, is your hand up? Would you like to speak?
Right. My opinion on the blue liquid is, we're not Smurfs. We don't bleed blue. Why you use blue liquid in the first place? It's just, obviously you can't use actual blood because there's some very obvious reasons. But blue liquid, really. We're not children. I mean, like, even when my nephew, for example, was really small, like, he'd comment on the adverts going, why is it blue? Like, and then he'd like comment whenever he'd fall over or something and go, look, it's red.
I think blue, it seems like blue is like a cleaning thing, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like, it's weird. And then to call it like a sanitary product and like this thing about it being dirty and you're like, do you know what? It's not nice and blue like that. Like, it's
And
nothing like that.
even then, a menstrual cycle or a period or whatever name you want to give it, it's not dirty. It's just something that happens. It's a physical human body process, a bit like farting. You know, it happens every day. It won't stop happening until the human race is no more. So I really want to say some words that are not recording friendly, but they are Warren friendly. I really want to say them.
You can say them, Lizzie, because we've got a fancy editor. So if it's too bad, we'll edit it out.
Why are people such dicks about it? It's really fudging annoying.
I agree. And I've just noticed that Andy had put something in the chat. Maybe I could read it out. Like, just says that in school, male teachers always made me feel guilty about the fact I was fully bleeding and was already terrified. School was horrible for it because there was essentially this don't talk about it mentality, which confused me because it was something half the school experienced monthly. So why should it make people uncomfortable to hear me complain about my discomfort?
Yeah.
Exactly. It shouldn't even be viewed as a complaint. A bit like the Warren space, it should be an open, neutral ground to talk about something that roughly half of the population goes through. Like, who's to say that? I do, Andy. I do hope I can use you as an example. Like, I'm not gonna like say anything overtly personal or anything, but fucking hell, it is so annoying to hear it viewed as a complaint and as someone being weak or something like that, because somebody who is experiencing that level of pain from their uterus literally ripping itself out of the body, holy shit, because I would like to experience that pain and still go through everything that we have to do as people. Because in fact, and also I don't think I'd be able to do that. I don't think anybody would be able to do that. Yet people who do experience menstrual cycles are forced to deal with everything else as well as that. Whereas I know it's really bloody crippling. Just sort of why I'll go to the shop for the whatever things people need for it, you know, whatever like comfort items, whether that be Maltesers or I don't know what people have for comfort during it, because I don't experience it myself. And that's sort of why I'm an arse about it, because I'd much rather be an arse and take that backlash from Karens than have the person who's already bleeding go through that.
Yeah, amazing, thank you. I would say I wouldn't call you an arse, I'd probably call you an advocate or an activist. Oh really?
I've been called far worse in society, but then again, that's not my concern, is it?
No, absolutely. But yeah, completely. I think what you're saying in terms of kind of the experience of pain, especially, there is often this narrative that, okay, we can acknowledge that women have this pain, but they have to be strong and they have to be heroes and they have to carry on regardless of the fact that, you know, they might be suffering from something called endometriosis, where your, as you say, your uterus is literally trying to ruin your life. And the fact of the matter is that as people who have periods, we don't need to be that strong. I suppose being strong isn't about ignoring pain, and it isn't about just carrying on as normal. It's about recognizing what you need and what's going to enable you to feel safe and comfortable and thrive. And it's incredibly brave to be able to say, you know, I'm on my period, I'm experiencing this pain, and I need X, Y, Z. And that's exactly what should be happening. I can just see the chat, I think, went off again.
No, that was me posted in
Oh,
chat.
brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so absolutely, I think menstrual stigma, it's something that it evolves in so many ways, as you said, Lydia, through language as well. The idea of sort of sanitary products and hygiene products. Yeah, menstrual blood is not dirty. It's no dirty to any other blood that comes from the body. And if anything, vaginas themselves are self-cleaning, which is the only part of the body that does this. So, you know, all this nonsense around, you know, you need to have this specific perfume for your vagina, you need to, you know, steam your, no, just don't do any of those things. It's self-cleaning, it does it itself. And it's a very powerful thing. So yeah, so thank you guys all so much for that. If I move on, if I can, there we go, to menstrual myths in the UK. So the reason that I've said menstrual myths in the UK specifically is because they do alter depending on where you're from and depending on sort of what religion you are, and what culture you're inserted into. But just to kind of define a myth in this first place, which is a widely held but false belief or idea, and menstrual myths are spread as a result of silencing around period stigma. So this is one of the huge dangers of period stigma. Not only is it sort of isolating and offensive, but also it can lead to people believing in facts and statistics which are completely not true, and can put them in really dangerous situations. So I was wondering, does anyone have any sort of period myths that they've heard of growing up, or perhaps they're still unsure of to this day as to whether they're true at all? Would anyone like to talk about that? Yeah, Lizzie, go ahead.
I know it's not true, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The whole only women have periods. Fuck off. Fuck off with that viewpoint.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. There's obviously transgender men who have periods, non-binary people who have periods, anyone who, as you say, has that sort of internal plumbing has a period.
I don't know how to put my hand up digitally. How embarrassing when I've been like, everybody put their hand up digitally. You know what people used to say at school, that people could smell when you're on your period, or like bears. I remember people saying bears can find you, which is a bit scary. Don't know. I'm assuming bears can't find you.
I believe that that's true because, like, for example, like diabetes dogs, they can smell like when your blood sugars are low, and there's also some animals and some people with rather sensitive noses that can smell certain things, like a lot, like a dog's nose is around 8,000 times more sensitive than the average human's, which I don't know like the exact numbers and things behind it. But even I've been able to smell when people are about to start, and I'll say to them, I won't be like in a public space, oh, you're about to start bleeding and be in a lot of pain. But, like, you know, sort of I would say off to a side, but that sort of feels like I'm trying to suppress it, where I'm not trying to suppress anything at all. I'm just being like, you know, try and prepare as best as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't have any sort of hardcore evidence behind, you know, whether humans or animals can smell those kind of things. I mean, I know that, you know, dogs can tell sometimes when you're pregnant, which I think is really cool. But I think it's that sort of myth in particular is a double whammy, because not only is it itself something that, you know, we don't really know if it's true or false, but also it's got that added embarrassment of, oh gosh, someone else is going to be able to tell that I'm menstruating perhaps before I even know that I am. Whereas if, you know, the stigma didn't exist in the first place, why would anyone care that you could tell when someone was menstruating? So
Exactly.
yeah, great one. Thank you. Someone's just typed in the chat. Oh, there's a few things actually. I didn't even know what part of my genitalia was what till last year. Absolutely, yeah. So I think especially kind of the external genitalia, for those born as cis females, that's something which is really misunderstood. I think kind of the internal parts are often covered within sort of puberty education and learning about periods at school. You know, what's the vagina versus the vulva, and what's the clitoris versus the perineum and the anus. You know, there's all this mystery and wonder around what actually is the external genitalia. So yeah, again, that's something that due to stigma we don't talk about it, and we absolutely should. And as well as that, the smelling like fish thing always annoyed me, because that smell comes from throwing your pH balance off, usually through excessive cleaning. So the more these young girls got attacked for the fishy smell, the worse it will get because they try to clean it more. Yeah, absolutely. As we said, like the vagina is self-cleansing. It doesn't need, you know, any of these special products. Just simple water is absolutely fine. Lizzie, yeah, go ahead.
The fact that puberty education and sex education and all that, it's 300 years old in this country. It is out of date. It always has been out of date. And for example, when I was experiencing that sort of 12 years ago, they'd give us a chart of the quote 2 types of bodies, which is fucking horseshit in itself, and ask us to label each part. And if we didn't get it right, we'd get bollocks for it. We wouldn't get sort of shown, no, this is what a vulva is versus this is what a vagina is, this is what a clitoris is, and all that. We'd just get like roasted in front of everyone, which is just annoying as well. Obviously, I have a certain setup which is different to everyone else's. So, and even I didn't know, for example, what a prostate was until I was like 18, and I'm only 22 now. It's obviously it's not something that causes a menstrual cycle, but it's also something that causes stigma.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of those things you've just described, that's because of stigma existing in the first place. And it doesn't just affect young people on the playground, you know, it affects your teachers as well. It affects when you're in sort of a PSHE or sexual health class and you ask a question and a teacher might shy away or might be embarrassed or even laugh. You know, that's all because of stigma, and it's so incredibly unhelpful. Like as you described, you know, being laughed at and feeling kind of isolated and just confused further is not helping anyone, with stigma being the core issue there. So some other kind of menstrual myths in the UK I just wanted to sort of debunk, which you probably might have heard of. Hang on, is this going to work? There we go.
There we go.
Thanks. So PMS is all in your head. That's a huge one. That kind of the experience of cramps and headaches and aches and pains and bloating isn't something that genuinely happens. It's just something that's in your head. Obviously, absolutely not true. Your hormones go absolutely mental when you're on your period. So the expectation that your body isn't going to react to that in some kind of physical way is just nonsense. So obviously PMS is very real. And if you feel that the pain that you experience and the symptoms you experience are very intense and too intense, please go to your doctor, because intense pain isn't normal and it shouldn't be normalized. Lizzie, go ahead.
I actually wanted to partly say what you've just said about the intense pain, because I've come across people who have a period who can't get out of bed for the first day or the first 2 days or whatever. And the hormone imbalances, they are mental. Like even through like a week before or a week after is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's the body saying, oh, you're not having a kid, fuck you.
Yeah.
To put it very bluntly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what the sort of having a period is what happens when, you know, an egg doesn't experience fertilization. So yeah, that is kind of what the body is saying. So thank you for sharing that. And with PMS, it is something that obviously there's the pain that happens during the blood leaving the vagina, but also it happens up to 2 weeks before you even start your period, which is a long time. It can be up to half of your life when you're menstruating that you experience these really difficult symptoms. I'm just going to check the chat.
It was always like a big joke in my house when we were younger. It was like, oh, stay away from your mum. She's in PMS. She's in PMS, and like we would all sort of laugh about it. But and she probably wasn't, like, looking back, you know, she probably wasn't all those times, and you know, now realise that probably wasn't the healthiest things to go about doing. But it would be my dad be like, well, stay away from your mother, don't wind her up.
If I ever said out like that to my mother, she would crack me over the head with a rolling pin so fast. Like I'd with a rolling pin doing like Mach 2 across the kitchen.
Yeah, Leah, would you like to say something?
She's got herself muted.
Oh my God, that's what my mum would do. Crack me over the head.
Yeah.
Oh, he'd just make a big joke of it in my house. Like, even like from a young age, my dad will be down the pads aisle and I'll be down like the next aisle or something. And he'll shout across, do you want any fanny pads? And I'll be like, yeah, go on then, I'll get some. Because every man knows that women wear fanny pads. That's what, you know. So even now, I'm like, what, 25? Oh, fucking hell, I'm 25. Even now, it's like, when you jam rags, you're in the mood, argumentative, and you don't take it seriously, do you? They're only having a joke with you, so you just like laugh it off, and it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Well, I know, like my dad just loves jokes.
I mean, I love fanny pads. I've never heard that before, but it is one I'm going to be using. So thank you for that. Lizzie, go ahead.
I
Do you
agree
also
that
fanny pads?
lovely. I think that maybe having appropriate comedy around it would sort of help with the stigma, but also it should be done in a space where everyone involved in that space who like has a period or experiences them like they should be okay with it. Like, you know, it shouldn't be offensive comedy. There should be an appropriate balance of comedy and fact. Like, you should never hide a fact, obviously, but maybe if the comedy is calling something that's used in a menstrual cycle a jam rag, like, I think like that was funny for me, but it might not have been funny for somebody else. And it's really hard to sometimes find that balance of what's funny for one person and the next.
Yeah, completely. I think that humor can definitely be a tool to dismantle stigma, and it's a really good way to invite people into the conversation who might otherwise not want to talk about it. I think, as you say, it's just important that if we're going to make sort of jokes about these bodily processes, that the humour is being led by those who experience it. And that obviously if someone it feels offended, then that's taken into consideration and changes can be made to language through that. But no, I completely agree with you. I think kind of all sort of bodily functions experience this kind of stigma, not just periods, but also just literally going to the toilet, having a wee or having a poo, or as you say, farting. All of these really normal things have so much stigma attached to them, and the humour around them does have to be led by those who suffer. So I mean, personally myself, I have IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, and I mean everyone else has sworn, so I'm going to swear just by the way.
Hey.
But what I tend to do is I lead on that joke and I say, oh, my stomach's really dodgy today, I think I might shit myself. And because I'm saying it, I'm taking the power back and I'm saying, you know, this is what's happening to me, I think it is funny, and I'm giving everyone else permission to have a laugh with it. Whereas if someone else who doesn't experience that is coming up to you, laughing at you, saying, haha, you must shit yourself all the time, then that's not being led by them, and it's not a safe space where they're able to leave that comedy and that conversation. So yeah, humor's a huge part. I just wanted to, anyone have their hands up, or we all okay?
There's somebody in the waiting room, so I'm just gonna let. I don't recognise who it is, but well, they've got a ticket.
What's the name, Lydia?
It's anyway. Don't want to make them feel really awkward when they're arriving.
Well, what's the name, and I'll be able to tell you if it's a Warren person.
I mean, I work here as well.
I mean, yeah.
Hopefully not a troll. We'll keep going.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then someone said in the chat has just put, last year I stopped having periods because of the rod, but kept getting PMS and it sucked. Yeah, so absolutely, again, with sort of contraceptive, there's this idea that, oh, well, if you take the pill, XYZ will happen and you're not going to have periods ever again. And that's simply not true. Some people will be on a particular pill where they are still bleeding, or they bleed intermittently, or they don't bleed at all. And it's completely different for everyone. So yeah, absolutely. I'll carry on with these myths. So PMS is all in your head. We've debunked that. Absolutely not true. Oh, the next two, okay. You can't get pregnant if you have sex on your period. This is completely and unequivocally not true. You can absolutely get pregnant if you have sex on your period. This was something that I was told all the time, sort of on the playground at school. And it's a really scary one that young people today still hear and still believe, because obviously you don't want to end up with an unwanted pregnancy if that's not what you choose for yourself. So that's another myth which is common in the UK. If you use a tampon, you lose your virginity. Again, this isn't true. So tampon is obviously inserted into the vagina, as you can see sort of from this this icon here. But the idea of inserting products versus losing your virginity and sexuality are completely separate things. Virginity itself isn't an actual process. It is a social construct. It's something that has been created, and whether people sort of want to experience being a virgin versus not being a virgin within their lives, that's completely their choice and up to them. But in terms of these kind of products and insertion, you do not lose your virginity through inserting a product into the vagina. Lizzie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that virginity is a social construct, and it denotes that anyone who is a virgin is, quote, pure and proper and all that bollocks, because which also really pisses me off, because then that like suggests that people who are actively having sex are somehow less than someone who's not. And often these sorts of comments come from people who I wouldn't want in my proverbial vagina, you know. But that's, I feel like that is a conversation that I should have in a different space about my own stuff.
Yeah, but no, really, that's a really important concept to explore. There's all these kind of myths as well around the hymen in the vagina and what that means relating to virginity. And just to sort of really quickly clear up some myths around that, when sort of having penetrative sex for the first time, sometimes the hymen can stretch a bit, sometimes it can tear a little bit, which does mean that sometimes there might be some really light bleeding, some light spotting. But the kind of crux of it is that the hymen is not a piece of skin which doesn't have any gaps or any holes in it. It's a stretchy piece of skin which reacts when different things are inserted into the vagina. So yeah, again, around this idea of kind of purity and what that means, it's very unlikely that anyone is born with a hymen that completely covers the entrance to the vagina. So yeah, brilliant. Next is tampons can get lost in your vagina. Obviously, this is not true. And just to have a little look at this graphic here, we've obviously got here, which is the tampon, which is being inserted into the vagina. And the vaginal canal is this red part. And then this sort of red part with the pink part here is the uterus. And in between the vagina and the uterus, there's the cervix. And the cervix is a really tiny hole. It's the thing that gets bigger. You know, when you're having a baby, you need to push it out. But generally, it's very small. It will stop tampons from going into your uterus or getting lost in there. So yeah, that is again untrue. I feel like, did someone put their hand up? I thought so.
There's people talking in the chat.
Okay. Let's have a look at that. I'm gonna go. Oh, Leah, I hope you feel better. Thanks for coming. Brilliant. Okay, and then the last one here is what we've already discussed. Really, menstruating women and those who menstruate are less capable / too emotional. And I think it's really important that we recognise that yes, you can be experiencing that hormonal imbalance, which you might feel like is making you feel more emotional or more tired or whatever that feeling might be. But alongside that, it doesn't make that individual any less capable of, you know, doing their job, of succeeding, of looking after themselves, of being of sound mind. None of that is true. So I think it's important that when people who have periods, they're kind to themselves and recognise that, you know, sometimes you might not be on your best form, and that's absolutely fine. But it doesn't give anyone the right to say that you're not capable of doing what you want to do and what you are able to do when you are not on your period. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so if we just go on to sort of how can we dismantle menstrual stigma and myths, there's a few things we can do. I realise I've only got like 5 minutes, so I'll try and speed up a little bit. But yeah, so what can we do to dismantle menstrual stigma and myths? Speak up and normalise periods. I feel like this is something that Lizzie is championing on and knows how to do really well, which is fantastic. So it's just about bringing them into everyday conversation, especially with younger people. I think if you're able to just even say the word period rather than, you know, like, I don't even know, I've got the painters in, or Aunt Flo's here, or, you know, all of those kind of strange languages that people use, just to actually say, you know, I'm menstruating, I'm on my period, this is what it means, this is what I'm going through. Especially for young people, hearing someone else say that is incredibly empowering, and it gives them the example that they can do the same. We can also sort of change our own stigmatized behavior. So when going to the bathroom with a product, you know, why not try and walk with it proudly in your hand, and answer any questions that might be had, or just even state, you know, that you're going to the bathroom for a product change or a specific thing. Again, leading by example through that is incredibly powerful. Another thing you can do is to transform your community into a period-friendly space. So this image here is a couple of our IRISE volunteers who were packing pads and contraception and menstrual information to some disadvantaged women and girls and people with periods across South Yorkshire, which is where I am right now. And we were able to distribute these to food banks and help thousands of women understand what their periods are, and what services are out there that are free and still running during COVID, to get help. And that's something that anyone can do. You know, if you want to go to a food bank with a huge bunch of provisions and products, that's absolutely fantastic, and they will receive them with open arms. And another thing you can do, obviously, is advocate for access to correct information, safe provisions and choice, and free services as well, which do exist. So that's all around kind of advocacy and activism, which I know some of you are really familiar with. Yeah, and then leading the way to period equality. So if you want to kind of learn more about this, I think get involved with, obviously, the Warren's growing campaign to raise awareness for period poverty, and empower all people with periods. We've also got some sort of leadership opportunities around ending period poverty and shame at IRISE. And we've also, at the bottom of this, we've got an opportunity for anyone with a period, or anyone who represents as female and presents as female, to fill in this form about how COVID has affected them, so we can make sure that we build back a sensitive response to those who have periods and those who identify as female moving forward, so that we can thrive in a period-friendly society altogether. So I think that's it from me. I'm wondering whether I did miss a page. I thought I missed a page. Hang on. Sorry, guys.
That's all right, mate. I was just going to say, I'll put the link to the survey on the Discord groups and that for those of you that are in them.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Right, let me just go through this last slide, which actually is kind of a nice summary and conclusion, really. But why do we need to dismantle menstrual stigma and debunk menstrual myths in the first place? So stigma and myths perpetuate embarrassment and isolation, and this in turn allows for silence. Silence leads to miscommunication, misconceptions, and misinformation. And then this misinformation leads to people with periods being unable to make informed choices about their own bodies. And this leads to really serious issues with their gynecological health, pregnancy, and STIs. So this is kind of the real crux of, stigma exists. Why is it that we need to do something about it? And I think that we've really kind of explored that today in all of your personal experiences, as to why it's so dangerous that menstrual stigma is persisting, in terms of, if you don't know what a period should be like, if you don't know what a period is and how, what's the standard kind of experience, how are you supposed to know if you're deviating from outside that experience? How are you supposed to know if you're in too much pain, or if you're bleeding too heavily? If you don't have the education and the open conversation for this, it means that those with periods who need some kind of extra medical attention are not getting it for a really long time and suffering because of that. So yeah, and then through doing that, obviously, these are the actions you can take. And then, yeah, so just send either sort of Elle or Lydia an email if you want to kind of get more involved in the activism and advocacy behind the period movement in the UK. My email's also down there if you'd like to get in touch. And yeah, that's it really. So thank you guys all so much for coming. I'll stop sharing now. And we've got 1 minute, so just on time. I'll hand over to you guys.
Thanks so much, Acushla. I would be like, let's do a round of applause, but we can't really do that on Zoom. Thanks so much for tuning in to our talk today. If you want to find more out about IRISE, head to their website www.irise.org.uk. And if you want to find out more about the Know Your Flow campaign at the Warren, please follow us on socials, the Warren Youth Project, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And if you want to get involved with our period focus group of young people aged 16 to 25, please email l@thewarren.org. See you next time.